What is Pennsylvania's prevailing wage, and what impact does it have on our economy? Let's see, next on Behind the Headlines.
This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow for the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by Maura Donnelly, my co-host. Maura, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Hi. Why, goodness, we're in the political season, and we've had both the Republican and the Democratic conventions now. Did you watch them? What do you think?
I watched selected segments of both of them, yes.
Anything change your mind?
Not so far.
Not so far.
Not
so
so
these
far.
are heavily scripted productions
Yes,
now.
yes.
There doesn't seem to be anything
They're-
spontaneous or new out of them.
They're big pep rallies for both sides, so I mean I think they both served their purpose for each candidate.
Okay. Well, and speaking of pep rallies, someone who's a great cheerleader for business and industry in Pennsylvania is our guest today. We're lucky enough to have with us Dave Taylor, who's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Hello,
More lovely to
Dave.
be with you.
Yeah, nice to
It's
see
so
you.
nice to have you back.
Well, I appreciate being here.
Well, and as I said, there's no one who's perhaps a more zealous advocate of manufacturing and business and creating a good business climate in Pennsylvania than you and your organization. One of the things, of course, that we've talked about in the past and continues to be of interest to us and to folks on the Hill is the prevailing wage issue.
Right.
Again, for new viewers, people that haven't been with us before, could you give us just a quick description of prevailing wage?
The problem with prevailing wage is that it is not the wage that prevails. You hear prevailing wage and it sounds like, well, you know, the taxpayer-funded projects will be, you know, it'll be paid the average wage in that particular market. Well, no, actually the state mandated pay scale for taxpayer-funded projects is based on union contracts and those especially in the big cities. So what you're talking about is requiring the taxpayers to pay the Philadelphia union wage for all taxpayer-funded construction regardless of where it takes place. So if you're putting a new roof on the middle school out in Perry County, the taxpayers have to pay the Philadelphia union wage. It's a jacked up above market taxpayer ripoff, and that in a saner world it would be abolished completely. Now, we don't expect that there's political support for that at this time, but there are some common sense reforms that need to be enacted to make it less burdensome on the taxpayer, and especially in these very tough budget times, to allow local school districts to make the dollars that they do get from the public to go further. So, you know, it's been a great source of frustration that even baseline threshold reforms have thus far been thwarted. But again, we remain hopeful that progress can be made, if not in this session, then in the next session, because you know, mercy on the taxpayers. It needs to happen. It's a cost of government issue, and all of those costs get passed along both to individual Pennsylvanians and employers, and all of those things, again, feed into the cost of government, the burden on the taxpayers, and as a result, our overall economic well-being.
So this is really an issue because there's a threshold amount over which projects have to use prevailing wage.
Yes.
But that number dates back to the early 60s.
Well, that's correct. That the threshold of applicability, you know, under what circumstances are local, any government entity required to pay the jacked up above market Philadelphia union rate, that the limit was set, the threshold was set when President John F. Kennedy was still alive. And that threshold is $10,000. Now, the equivalent of that in modern dollars would be, I think, just shy of 200 grand.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we wouldn't be, if that limit were modernized to reflect the current value of $1963, we wouldn't be in any way, you know, repealing the law, rolling back the law. We would just be modernizing it to reflect
current times.
to reflect the intent when the law was enacted. And again, the idea that we can't, we have not thus far been able to even get that kind of minimal reform shows how deeply entrenched the the Union Party is in the State House here in Harrisburg.
So the business community isn't actually seeking a full repeal of prevailing wage. They're just trying to bring it forward so that the project amount level makes more sense.
Well, I mean, there are several baseline reforms that that the business community has pursued. I mean, on behalf of the taxpayers and the public. There were 6 bills that were moved through the House Labor and Industry Committee, and any one of those things would be positive. We believe that all 6 of them are defensible, reasonable, common sense kinds of proposals. But there's been a war of attrition, trying to deal with those legislators who are in some way affiliated with organized labor. And I would say that in particular that our friends on the union side have been particularly unreasonable and unyielding on this prevailing wage issue. The modernization, reform. I mean, one of the other reforms that the business community is seeking is just to have work classifications fully delineated. Mm-hmm. That as it stands today, who does what and who qualifies for what job title is all guesswork. And if employers get it wrong, that can lead to fines and disbarment and all kinds of very consequential punishments. And so what you have is that for example, if you would have a worker who carries lumber, if carrying lumber is one of the jobs that would be included under master carpenter, then that laborer who is hauling lumber must be paid the rate of a master carpenter. It's again, it's total madness, and it's symptomatic of why on these kinds of projects that the costs are inflated by 20, 30, 40%. While yielding no additional value for the taxpayers.
What's taking place on the issue of classification? Is there any legislative action?
Yeah, that's another bill that cleared the committee that is that is awaiting action on the floor of the House. And again, I don't blame the leaders. Chairman Miller from York County has done an excellent job with marshaling his forces and getting these bills out for consideration and onto the calendar. It's a paradox that even though one would expect that the Republicans, as the pro-growth, pro-business party, would be able to get a majority of their members, it's just again, there's a rump group of Union Republicans who are standing athwart these kinds of elements in the pro-business, pro-taxpayer agenda.
Now, recently, you were at a meeting in Philadelphia, sponsored by the United States Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, it was very interesting that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and their Legal Reform Institute chose Pennsylvania's largest city to release their national survey results on the competitiveness of the legal climate,
particularly
in the
when the
respective
news
states.
for Pennsylvania and for the city of Philadelphia wasn't particularly
well,
good.
That was the point they were trying to make, that of the 50 states in the Union, that Pennsylvania ranked 40th best, and that
40th best in
having a balanced, positive legal climate for business investment and jobs and growth.
Or 40th worst, is the case.
Well, 10th, yeah,
technically,
10th from the bottom.
10th from the bottom,
Yeah.
and again, it's as I often say, that there's no silver bullet for maximizing Pennsylvania's economic growth. There are any number of issues where we need to do better, but it's disconcerting when, regardless of the survey, that when Pennsylvania isn't in the bottom 10, we're in the bottom 20. And that this survey, which was based on interviews with corporate counsel at some of America's largest employers, and asking these these attorneys what their opinion was of the competitiveness of the business climate in these respective states, that this is their opinion in the aggregate of how well or how poorly our legal system is functioning. And so Pennsylvania ranked 40th, but of the survey also allowed these attorneys to volunteer. Are there bad places in particular where you would not want to do business? And that Philadelphia, Pennsylvania came in 5th from the bottom on that. So the fact that Philadelphia was ranked 5th worst in the nation by America's corporate council, who are the people who are going to advise CEOs and COOs and CFOs as to where companies choose to invest, to hire. That's very consequential for Pennsylvania, and that was why we were there in support of the U.S. Chamber, the PA Chamber, and our other business allies to highlight the results of this report. And in my remarks at the podium, I did emphasize these are problems that can only be solved in Harrisburg. That these are state-level policies that need to be enacted to rebalance the scales and to make Pennsylvania's legal climate more responsive, so that Pennsylvania can do better in the ongoing competition between the states for investments and job and growth.
And this is a new survey, but it's not really new information. We have always been at the bottom.
Well, and it's again, they don't call them Philadelphia lawyers for nothing. And those who participated, it wasn't simply the business community, it was the whole productive sector, that you had the doctors and the hospitals also represented, along with businesses large and small.
A questioner was the Pennsylvania Bar Association there, Dave.
Well, no, of course not.
They were watching, though.
I hope so.
I would imagine.
I hope so.
It's sad to say.
That's that is kind of, how does one get the Bar Association? How does one get the state's legal community into the mix, Dave?
Well, there are a number of these reforms that have progressed through the House and are awaiting action in the Senate. One of the pieces of legislation that was referred to several times was the apology bill, and what that bill would do would be to allow medical professionals to empathize with patients or families when there's a bad outcome, to be able to have that human moment to say that I'm so sorry that things didn't go well, and without that being an admission of guilt. And again, this would not limit anyone's right to sue, would not limit anyone's right to discovery. It would simply allow a physician to act like a real human being when a patient or a family has a bad outcome,
without incurring liability.
Without incurring liability for it, because again, nobody promised us a perfect life, and even when best practices are followed and the correct course of treatment is pursued, not all patients will respond. It's regrettable, but we're not machines.
We've heard this notion being discussed for some time, and I can't imagine that our viewers aren't just sort of somewhat stunned by the fact that this still hasn't passed.
Well, it's awaiting action in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and that if the viewers are interested, they need to prevail upon Senate Judiciary Chairman Stuart Greenleaf of Montgomery County to bring the apology bill up for a vote.
What could possibly be the holdup with that, Dave?
Well, again, it's something where the litigation industry is opposed to this reform, because so many suits are filed because patients feel disrespected, that they feel that they weren't treated with fairness and kindness, and that actually having that human moment of apology, even when there's been some kind of a failure on the part of the doctor or the hospital, that having that human moment more often leads to mediation and a quicker resolution outside of the courts. And when that happens, that the trial lawyers don't get their 30 or 40% commission off of awards. So again, the litigation industry has its own goals, its own revenue stream that they're concerned about much more than the public good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Dave, we want to thank you for being with us today and keeping us up to date on these developments that affect the manufacturing climate of Pennsylvania. And we want to thank you for your work on behalf of the Commonwealth.
It's my great pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Dave.
Maura and I will be right back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals to provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Underwriters of America, a better way for truck insurance. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Penn Waste is proud to be a locally owned business. Since the company's founding in 2000, it has employed many of its neighbors as members of a dedicated team of professionals. Penn Waste is proud of its many contributions to the people of its service area through support of numerous community organizations such as Christmas Addicts and the Junior League of York. One more way they improve the quality of life where they live and work.
Welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines, and in this segment, Maura and I are joined by Dave Sanko, who is the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Association of Township Supervisors. Dave, welcome back.
Thanks, Charlie. Good to be here.
It's nice to see you. We have you back because there has been an issue in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that has bedeviled state government and bedeviled local government for such a long time. And we don't seem to ever finally resolve it. And we wanted to talk to you about that, and of course that is the issue of prevailing wage. I guess first, could we start out by you sharing with our viewers what prevailing wage is?
Sure. Prevailing wage is a state rule that requires, at least on public works projects, that a certain level of salary be paid to workers for those public works projects. And we've seen, and that level was set as at a threshold level in 1963 at $25,000. We've seen in recent years, you can't buy anything for. I mean, what you used to be able to buy for $25,000 in 1963, you could buy a house for $25,000. Now for $25,000, maybe you can renovate the bathroom. The money just doesn't go as far as it did then, and we've been advocating for an increase in that cap, which would essentially just mean communities would be able to save money, and with that savings, generate more jobs.
Well, it actually is that the prevailing wage results in a 30 to 75% increase in over market wages for public projects. Correct.
It can be up to 30%
Okay, up to
increase
30%.
in the labor costs.
Right.
Now, depending on, I mean, a lot of the costs are also material, but in highway paving projects, as an example, there was a court order a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, during the Rendell administration, that said paving or repaving was no longer considered maintenance and was now considered new construction. That added $300 million to statewide paving costs, and that money could be easily spent doing other things.
Or reducing my taxes, or not making them. I mean, let's bring it down to my level. It's a tax issue.
The projects need to get done, and there's other ways to get them done. That money could be, if it's allocated. Right now you have to only be able to, you may only be able to afford to pave a mile. If you bring those numbers down to an existing or a more normal pay scale, you may be able to pave a mile and a half. So you can get more work done. It creates more work for the workforce and doesn't raise your taxes.
Dave, can you share with our viewers what happened in that one instance of reclassifying the road work under, you said that happened under the Rednell administration?
Was
what happened?
An order by the Secretary of Labor and Industry that said that road repaving projects, anything less than 3 inches of new pavement, would now be considered new construction, as opposed to what it is traditionally been or what had been considered for decades and considered maintenance. So that local townships would be able to do that work on their own, or would be able to bid it out to the lowest responsible bidder in their community, and be able to do those maintenance projects. And now,
how much additional money did that require on the part of state taxpayers?
If you were to repave all the roads, all the township roads at one time, it would be an additional $300 million. So taking that threshold off would save $300 million and enable communities to do other things and arguably create more jobs for the workforce.
I'm perplexed. Very perplexed. This has been in place since 1963. It seems to be such a clear-cut issue that needs to be changed, and there needs to be some reform. Why isn't it happening?
Well, I agree with you. I share your frustration.
Perplexion.
My gosh, I was in diapers when this rate was set, and 50 years is a long time. And it does seem to be a common sense reform. It's one of the handful of common sense reforms that we advocated to the legislature that don't cost the Commonwealth a single dime. They're not. It's not anti-worker. It's not anti-labor. It's one of pro-jobs. But the obstacle to date have been the resistance to change has been, I think, just the traditional resistance to change from organized labor.
Since we're talking about additional costs and different studies of these additional costs, Dave, I think there have been some studies which have indicated all the projects that are affected by prevailing wage in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania each year drive up costs to state taxpayers by about what number? You remember?
A lot.
Okay. I was citing that one study. It was $2 billion.
Okay.
$2 billion that prevailing wage affects us across the board for all different types of projects.
And that applies to, the schools, school districts, roads and bridges that the community may be building, township buildings, recreation facilities, parks. A lot of things that you wouldn't normally think of. We've had some communities simply say we're going to convert the roads back to gravel rather than pave them because we can't afford to.
Where is that happening?
In Venango County. In Greene County, in Morgan Township, they haven't put a road paving project out to bid since the order for 4 or 5 years now. They're doing tar and chipping, but it's difficult to get
really
a good
slow
handle.
Traffic down a bit, wouldn't it?
It will, sure, but it's difficult to get a handle on what the prevailing wage costs are and what they wouldn't be because. And I think opponents are quick to say, "Oh, you can't tell us what the savings are." Well, we can't tell what the savings are because it's illegal to put bids out that don't ask for the prevailing wage rate. So the only time you get to find out the difference or the savings is when somebody makes a mistake. And in each instance, when we've seen those mistakes, when they be put out, we've seen those costs go up 30%. We saw after there was in Butler County, Western Pennsylvania, Township had put a bid out for a paving project before that court order 4 years ago and had their price. The court order came down. They couldn't make the award. They had to rebid with the new specs, and that's probably the single best instance of a before and after where it's real. And they saw the costs increase 25% on the same project in the same year.
Well, we've talked to you in the past about the consolidation and merger of municipalities that are distressed, and they're all struggling right now in this economy. And you've indicated that prevailing wage, or dealing with this prevailing wage issue, would be a significant of significant importance to them, and help struggling municipalities.
Sure. It would be a big savings. Let's be clear when we talk about that the consolidation and merger. The communities are doing an awful lot of shared shared services now. You'll have some communities that one community will buy the paver, one will buy the dump truck, somebody else will buy the asphalt, a fourth community will provide the labor, so that those four communities will take that team and travel
That's
around
project
and
consolidation.
do a lot of project consolidation.
That makes sense.
And saves an awful lot of, so those kinds of savings are going on now. In fact, 81% of all our communities are participating in some form of shared services products. But the prevailing wage, just changing the threshold on the prevailing wage. We're not talking about eliminating it.
Yeah.
We're just talking about changing the threshold to making $1963 become $2,012. Would be a huge savings for communities and to taxpayers immediately.
And that seems such common sense. That just seems such common sense. But what progress have you been able to make on this issue in terms of reforming it at the state level, Dave?
Well, I think it's been out there for 50 years. That there is any movement and talk about it is significant. The House Labor Committee has produced a package that is set for a vote on the floor of the House in the next couple weeks. We are optimistic that they'll bring that to a vote there, and the Senate has said as soon as the package comes over, they'll run it, and the governor has signaled his willingness to sign it. It does seem to be common sense, but it's we'll see as it goes through the course of the process in the House in the next couple weeks.
So this fall?
Hopefully this fall. Hopefully, there's 8 and 9 days in September and October. This is either going to be addressed now and fixed as a common sense reform to benefit taxpayers, or we'll have to wait for the new legislature when we get here in January.
Okay.
This fall.
All right. Well, we thank you very much for coming to the studio today, Dave, and sharing your the progress on this item, and we'll be following it with you in the next couple of weeks.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll be back with you next week with a new edition of Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.
Behind the Headlines is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, a nonpartisan, nonprofit research organization helping Pennsylvania build a brighter future.